Great, so now that we have our modules imported, the next step, and you probably already guessed this, is user input capture, right? We need a way to read in the URL the user desires to scrape for emails. So what we'll do is we will just use the input function. You can see this is a prompt, read a string from standard input. That's exactly what we want to do. I just pressed Control K, Control T really quick because I just want to change the theme to something different. All right, so there we go. We've got our input function. And what we'll do is we'll put it in a string. And we'll ask the user to enter a target URL. And I'll put a space at the end, so when they enter it, it's not smashed up against this colon. And what we'll do is we'll just save this in a variable called original URL. And we could actually just run a quick print on this to see what it looks like after we run it. So I'm going to hit the play button. And if I just type securitypluspro.com, you can see it just prints it out. Nothing too great there, right? But we're making progress. So one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that whatever the user enters is a string. So if they put a bunch of numbers, we don't want it to be interpreted like digits. We want it to be interpreted as a string. So we could wrap this entire thing in a string method. So we're basically passing the user's input into the string method to force the data type to be a string. And let's see, let's go ahead and print out this type. Type will show us the data type. Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V, and you can see it is indeed a string, so that's good. Control backtick to close that bottom pane, and let's take out this print, and let's continue. So we're actually going to look at some debugging too. Right now I'm just using the print statement, but we're going to use Wireshark. We're going to debug this thing. I'm going to show you guys really how to code correctly in Python, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Taking it one step at a time. Now, the next thing we need to do is create a collection of websites to crawl, right? We want a bunch of URLs. Essentially, what this is going to do is it's going to spider. We're going to put one URL in, right? Let me draw this out for you guys. All right, so the user will put in a URL, and then the application will go, this is a horrible arrow, but you get the idea, right? The application will go to the document. It'll scrape all the HTML source, and then it will look for all the links. And then of those links, it'll extract the links that actually have emails. And it'll just keep extracting all the links and emails from the document until it's done. Then it'll actually follow any links on the page. Let's say this red one right here, that's a link. It'll go to that web page and repeat the process of finding any links from this page. So this might be page A, this might be page B. And then, there might be a couple links here, and it'll do the same thing, right? So it's basically a spider and a scraper, and an email collector really is what it's doing. So we'll inspect this. You'll see how it works as we build it, and hopefully everything will start to make sense. I'm going to try to explain everything I'm doing as I'm doing it. So what we want to do here is we need to create, a collection of websites to crawl. We need a place to store the websites that we're going to crawl. And our scraper is going to scrape not just all the URLs that it finds, right? We don't want to spider forever. So we're going to set sort of a depth count or a scrape level so that it only scrapes up to a certain amount of URLs and then it stops or exits the loop. But one of the ways to track all these URLs is in a dec object. Okay, it looks like the word deque, but it's actually pronounced dec. How do I know that? Because in the documentation, it is pronounced, it actually says it's pronounced dec. I know it doesn't say that here, but if you go to the Python documentation, it says that. And think of it kind of like a deck of cards. It's like an optimized list. And it's perfect for our use case right here. So let's go ahead and create our queue of unscraped URLs that we want to be crawled. So this will or be a unique list of data type dec. Okay, so I'm going to say dec. And then in here, you can see it says a list-like sequence. It is kind of like a list, but it's not really a list. But this is coming from our collections module. So in here, I will put in the original URL and we'll save it in a variable called unscraped URLs, right? So then we can put our unscraped URLs inside of this dec collection. It's going to be a collection. So right now we only have one URL, but this will build out. Now, the other thing we want is we want all the unique emails that we've captured, right? Unique. The keyword is unique. So we can use the set data type, right? A set doesn't really say here. I guess it does. Yeah, it does. Build an unordered collection of unique elements. So that's what we want to do. We want a collection of elements, but we want them to be unique. That's the key. So we're going to create this variable so we can store really all of the processed unscraped URLs somewhere so we don't end up scraping it twice. So what we can do is we can say, all right, we want a set object and we want it to be called scraped URLs. That's the set. That word scraped looks weird, but I think that's how you spell it. And we also want to track the unique email addresses, right? So we can say emails are also of type set. So now we've got our unique emails, our unique scraped URLs. We've got our unscraped URLs, which is a collection, really a dec. Let me just show you guys what I'm talking about when I say dec, because it may not be clear. So here's the documentation, and you can see it is pronounced dec. It's short for double-ended queue. And it's memory efficient. It's really good when you want to, pop something off in front of a list. And that's actually what we're going to do. We're going to remove and return an element from the left side of the list. That is the first URL from the list. And then we're going to pop those off as we go, okay? So you'll see it all makes sense as we continue to code. In the next lecture, we're going to jump into the scraping process itself. So this is kind of all the setup. And now we will scrape. All right, guys. So I'll see you in the next one. Peace.